Ramadan, the holiest month in Islam, is a time for deep reflection, spiritual growth, and community. Muslims around the world abstain from food and drink from dawn to dusk, focusing on prayer, charity, and strengthening their connection with Allah. Bangalore transforms into a culinary wonderland during Ramadan. From the bazaars of Shivaji Nagar to Koramangala, the city lights up during iftar, the evening meal that breaks the fast. Keeping in line with the festivities, we decided to visit the bustling food mela in Koramangala to witness the magnificent culture through our own eyes.
We went in the breezy evenings to have our senses regaled with the amazing delicacies. The Ramzan Food Mela is not just about satisfying hunger, it's a cultural extravaganza. Food has always been a central aspect of culture, and the Ramzan Food Mela is a prime example of how culinary traditions reflect broader cultural values.
Yeah, actually last time हम लोग ने Fizzy Town में डाला था. Last time I put this stall in Fizzy Town. It was really hit. It was really a big hit show for me. So I just wanted to try my luck for the next year also. So this year. So I just came to know that till the last moment we were not knowing that we will be getting the stalls. But at last, just before 2 days back of Ramzan, we came to know that we are getting the stalls are available. So me and my husband we came here and we just tried our luck and we got this stall. From that time we have started our stall. Alhamdulillah, it's really nice. It's a big hit for me.
The Mela transcends religious boundaries. It's a space for social interaction and a celebration of community. Food becomes a common language, bridging divides and fostering connections. Here, you'll find Hyderabadi Halim alongside melt-in-your-mouth cheesecake, a testament to Bangalore's cosmopolitan identity.
हमारे पास जैसे कि ये रेड स्नैपर फिश आएगा, ये आप लोगों के लिए फिश टिक्का है। इधर मटन चपली कबाब जो पाकिस्तान से आता है, मटन शीख कबाब हमारा बिल्कुल डिफरेंट होगा। इधर पेपर चिकन है, बोनलेस में आएगा। ये पेपर काड़ी गोश है, ये पहाड़ी कबाब, मलाई कबाब और इधर प्रॉन्स आइटम, इधर मलाई कोफ्ता आएगा मटन में। मटन का चॉप्स आएगा, वो भी बिल्कुल डिफरेंट रहेगा और एक बर्रा चॉप्स और हलीम भी है। तो बहुत सारे आइटम है और आने वाले टाइम में जो 22 दिन बचे 22 डेज उसमें बहुत सारे डिफरेंट आइटम हम लोग लाने वाले हैं।
As we delve deeper into the Koramangala Ramzan Food Mela, we'll employ the framework of cultural materialism, a theoretical approach championed by anthropologist Marvin Harris. Cultural materialism helps explain how the material conditions of a society influence its social organization and cultural beliefs and practices. Central to Harris's work, outlined in Cultural Materialism, the struggle for a science of culture is the notion that cultural practices can be systematically analyzed through a materialist lens. Here at the Mela, the lens allows us to move beyond simply observing the what of the food and display and instead understanding the why by analyzing the how aspect of the manner in which materials have been used in context of culture. By examining the infrastructure, social organization, and environmental factors at play, we can gain a richer appreciation for the cultural significance of the food served.
Eaten to our heart's content, but now arouse several observations with regard to the material culture behind the food consumed. We observed several key aspects: economic factors, cultural exchange, social cohesion and preservation of rituals, the aspect of gender. Let's dive into these factors in more detail, and for that, we decided to interview a professor of food studies here at Christ University.
So I'm Dr. Naina George. I'm assistant professor here at Christ University. So about the ideas about food and how it has been linked to culture, it has been something that is always known to be this very overt yet a very covert marker. Now it is something that you use very culturally as well. Like when you go out to eat with your friends, what do you eat, the way that you eat, all of that comes into picture.
The Food Mela serves as an economic platform for local vendors, providing them with an opportunity to showcase and sell their culinary creations. It reflects the economic dynamics of the area. What is interesting is the capitalistic intersection of corporations like Empire and other established restaurants with what could have been a localized cultural practices, where now most of the spaces and stalls are owned by Empire and other major restaurant owners.
The Mela facilitates cultural exchange by bringing together
people from different backgrounds to share and experience diverse cuisines. This exchange is not just about food, but also the exchange of ideas, traditions, and values, contributing to cultural hybridity and adaptation. The consumers can set aside any inherent prejudices and enjoy good food, and the vendors diversify what they make, expanding it to include more Western and other items. Therefore, it is important to discuss the social organization within the Mela, including the roles of individuals or groups involved in food production and consumption. Exploring the participation of women in cooking, serving, and purchasing food can reveal patterns of labor division, gender roles, and community cooperation.
Yeah, and even in the stalls, right, usually you'll find that if men are doing any sort of cooking, it's mostly frying the meat, or like usually they'll only stick with the non-vegetarian things. But if there are onions to be chopped, otherwise if there are workers, it's different. But especially in a domestic setting also, the maximum that you can expect a lot of men to do in these cases, it's a generalization nonetheless, but it's a generalization that has been actually actively established within food studies, that if there are men involved, largely they'll be still be linked to the idea of non-vegetarian food. So a vegetarian diet has also been linked to the idea of being effeminate in nature. So again, when you look at the idea of fasting in, say, the Islamic sort of a context, who's making all the food? And if there is that notion, if you're fasting, you are allowed to sleep during the day. But women are not sleeping during the day, they're cooking throughout. But it's also torturous in that sense that they're cooking, but they can't taste it, they can't eat it, but they're always surrounded by food. So if anything, their level of temptation is so much more. Because men have the luxury of just staying away from it entirely. We won't see food until it's time for us to eat. But women are constantly cooking.
Food plays a pivotal role in social cohesion, creating bonds among individuals and communities. The communal aspect of breaking a fast together fosters solidarity and strengthens social ties, highlighting the importance of shared rituals in maintaining social harmony. The rituals associated with Ramadan are also imbued with the symbolic significance, and the Food Mela serves as an extension of these rituals, providing a space for people to engage in collective feasting and reflection.
I think of food as a source of cultural inclusion and exclusion in terms of what is being consumed and how.
Most of the Abrahamic religions, like if you look at Judaism and if you look at Islam, there is a certain sense of how food has to be maintained with a certain level of purity. That's why you have the Jewish notion of kosher food, and you have, in Islam, you have the notion of halal food. So Christians moved away from it a long time ago due to other reasons. But otherwise, there is that notion of food being pure enough. So there is also that notion that why Islam, or in general Muslims, get excluded from certain kinds of communities is because they do a lot of excluding themselves, in the sense that they will actually go to restaurants and ask, is this halal? Yeah, so it's in that sense it also turns into that double-edged sword of them wanting purity, but they're seen to be the polluted ones in that sense.
We feel that food is a cultural output and that this Mela has become a means of representation of Muslims in Bangalore. What are your thoughts about that?
Like, it is a very much of a cultural sort of a performance that they're doing, and it's ordered. I mean, the audience there is very important, and they also know that they need to have audience that are not just part of their community, because otherwise, one, they would not commercially sustain, but two, it is a very prominent sort of a show. Like, it is a projection that they're doing, that we are still here, and no matter how much you try to push us out, these sort of performances are necessary, because ultimately this is also part of larger Bangalore's urban cosmopolitan image also. But it's also the notion that people will still look down on it with disdain, about the idea of bringing in the idea of hygiene, bringing in the idea of, oh, they eat meat, a lot of those pictures then. But that's also there, like, I mean, it's the notion that it's that necessary evil sort of an idea that they don't like it, but it's still there, and it will probably continue for a really long time also.
Ma'am, what are your opinions about cultural amalgamation and nomenclature associated with certain food items?
So this is the idea, like, there's been a long-standing debate in food studies about the idea of authenticity. Like, what do you call something as authentic, and how long will it remain authentic for? So there has been a lot of debate about it, but after a long time of research and everything, I am also of the opinion that the idea of authenticity is not something that you can always stick to, because it will progress over time. Things are bound to change, because they're also trying to attract, keep in mind, that the younger audience. So they can't keep making the same traditional kind of food, because that may not have too many takers. Who really buys food outside? A lot of the youth, right? And Bangalore, being the more cosmopolitan urban sort of a space that it is, has a lot of the youth population. So they have to ensure that they're marketing to them as well. And it's also the idea of palatability, where they're bringing in things that are familiar to them. So a cheesecake is familiar to an Islamic youth and a non-Islamic youth. But on the other hand, something that's so sheer korma and things like that, while we know of, but it's still linked to the idea of iftar food, and in that sense, but it still has that label of being part of being iftar food. So somebody who's say non-Islamic may have a certain kind of hesitation to try it, even though it's pretty much the same as normal payasam or kheer. But there are certain it's the idea of labeling certain things as well. So when you call something as say mutton and when you call something as gosht, there is a certain difference in the labeling that comes in. So sometimes people do that intentionally to sound very fancy, because certain restaurants use that to their advantage, and suddenly they're very Urdu sounding names. But it's for a very high culture sort of a clientele also. But in this sense, because it's more street in that sense, it has to cater to a large set of people. So then they bring in whatever sells will be sold in that sense. So anything that's very popular, it's definitely going to be there.
Ma'am, what are your opinions about the ownership of the stalls and space by bigger restaurant owners and corporations and the larger marriage of capitalism and culture?
It's because it's a cultural product that it becomes marketable. Because it's marketed as a cultural product. But if not for the commercial enterprise, it would not exist. Or at least it would not sustain for this long. Or it would sustain on a much smaller scale. So then it won't become a marked product in that sense.
But is it ethical or organic for it to survive?
Ethical, not so much. Organic, yes, it's a very natural process that human beings will look at something and we will commodify it. I mean, if we commodify people, why will we not commodify practices as such? So it's a very normal sort of a process, because that's what we look at, right? I mean, there's no way that you can stop commercialization from happening. Because the whole idea is that if it were just say individual owners who are coming in out of their households, they will get marked for, do they have licenses to sell food? They're sort of an owner, they can't really sustain for a long period of time. And then it becomes, or it goes back to being hidden, where they say, come to our place, we will sell you this. So then it again becomes very exclusionary also, because you have to be in the know to find out if this is there.
While we tried our best to answer several questions, we were left with several observations that we could not explore as deeply. Before we part, we would like to invite the audience to observe with us and think critically about what they see on the screen.
We know that cultural materialism is an extension of Marxism, and therefore it is important to analyze the power dynamics behind the food stalls. Since most of what we eat there is controlled and owned by more financially sound institutions, the small individual vendors miss out on an opportunity to represent their culture. However, the lens of cultural materialism proves to be better than Marxism in analyzing the food mela, because the materials being observed help us identify the uniqueness that is attributed to the culture through its specific features as well as differences with respect to other cultures. This benefit is not only towards the higher economic classes but the lower ones as well. The very place where the stalls are set up is also extremely significant. Another important point of discussion is the controversial ban of street stalls by BBMP in some areas like Fraser Town, which was replaced by restaurants setting up individual kiosks on their premises.
Before we conclude, we would like to inform the viewers that ours is an ethic approach to behavior infrastructure, and that a recognizable problem with cultural materialism is that certain material constraints, such as food resources, are culturally defined. For example, no culture unitizes all possible food resources available there is. The food culture created in the Ramzan Food Mela is an amalgamation of discussed socio-economic factors, and it was an honor and privilege to witness and document its cultural vibrance for this assignment. This resulted in us being more observant and introspective of the practices and traditions that surround us, and their construction, which is rarely as innocent and circumstantial as it seems. While this was definitely a difficult process with several setbacks which we had to overcome, It was also extremely rewarding and made us fall in love with Bangalore again as we engaged with the communities and its people and remembered what a glorious mixing pot of culture our city is.